Hi everyone, welcome back to Beauty and the Beast, where we do our skincare or makeup together while diving into spooky stories from around Asia. Today's real-life horror story is one I came across online, and I haven't been able to stop thinking about it. Not just because it's creepy, but because it's something I've weirdly imagined before. Like, what if someone was secretly living in my house and I didn't know? Well, in this story, that what if actually happened. So grab your skincare, settle in, and maybe keep an ear out for sounds coming from the ceiling. Let's get started. So today's guy, let's name him Chinu. Chinu was just your average Korean guy in his early 40s. He'd worked for years in Seoul, South Korea, at various IT startups. And after modest success, he finally decided to slow down a bit, moved out to the quiet outskirts of Gyeonggi-do. The house he found, it was an old single-family home tucked right up against the edge of a forest. He'd grown tired of apartment life, the noise, the neighbors, and the endless city buzz. So this place, it felt like his own little castle, peaceful, isolated, and safe. So every morning, he would brew his coffee in that quiet house with the garden out front, soft music playing in the background, a book in hand. That's how his days began, calm and predictable. So evenings were simple. Maybe a glass of wine, maybe a movie on Netflix. Sometime he would just talk to himself. Just a word here and there like he was the only person in the world. But Chinu didn't mind the solitude. In fact, he enjoyed it. He preferred it. No one to bother him, no awkward small talk, just silence, pure, uninterrupted. And he loved it. At least he did until he started noticing the signs, the things that didn't make sense. That was when everything began to change. That house wasn't as quiet as he thought. Every Friday evening, like clockwork, Chinu would stop by the supermarket on his way home from work. And living alone, he only bought what he needed for the week. A couple packs of ramen, some salad greens, a bit of chicken breast, a few pieces of fruit. And always a small pack of yogurt drinks. It was like a habit, maybe even a comfort. Something about that sweet, familiar taste reminded him of childhood. And that night was no different. He came home, put the groceries away, opened a bottle of wine, turned on his music, and finished the day in peace. Then came Saturday. After his morning jog and a refreshing shower, Chinu, still damp-haired and relaxed, opened the fridge to grab one of his favorite yogurt drinks and stopped. Something felt off. There should be 6. But there was only 5. He blinked, leaned closer, and counted again. No mistake. 1 was gone. At first, he thought maybe he misremembered. Maybe he had grabbed one last night without thinking. But he was sure he hadn't. So he double-checked the receipt, still sitting on the counter. Yogurt 6-pack, 1. He just stood there, staring into the cold fridge, the whir of the motor, the only sound in the room. He knew he hadn't touched it. Still, he brushed it off. Maybe it fell out of the bag on his way home. Maybe he bought a damaged pack and one got lost somewhere. Most people would have thought the same. It was such a small thing, after all. So Chinu let it go. But that was just the beginning. After that day, the small changes started happening more often. A slice or 2 of ham would be missing. Thin, clean cuts as if someone had carefully taken just enough not to be noticed. A hard-boiled egg, peeled, ready to eat, would vanish from the container. And one morning, even a teaspoon that usually sat next to the utensil holder was just gone. But here's the thing, there was no sign that anyone had come in. The front door had a digital lock. He had a CCTV camera pointed right at the entrance. And nothing else was missing. Not valuables, not electronics, just food. things you wouldn't even think to lock away. But then came the night that changed everything. The moment Chinu knew something was seriously wrong. It was the middle of summer, hot, humid, the kind of night where the air feels heavy on your skin. Before going to bed, Chinu had walked over to the kitchen. There was a glass jar of cherry jam he'd taken out the day before. He'd been craving a late-night snack. He'd even scooped up a spoonful, about to spread it on some bread. But then he remembered he was supposed to be cutting back. So he sighed, licked his lips, and carefully put the jam back in the jar. Closed the lid tight, left it on the counter, went to bed. The next morning, he came back to the kitchen. And what he saw made him freeze. The surface of the cherry jam wasn't smooth anymore. There was a deep, uneven gouge through it, like someone had scraped it with their fingers. Not a spoon, not a knife, fingers. Chinu just stood there, motionless, staring at the jar. And then, in the quiet, in a voice barely louder than a whisper, he said, "Did someone come in?" He didn't wait. He searched the entire house. He checked the doors, locked, the windows all shut tight. He even pulled up the CCTV footage from the front door. Nothing. No one had come in. No movement, no strange shadows. No sign that anyone had come near the house. And it didn't make any sense. And that made it even more terrifying. From that day on, Chinu felt like he was being hunted by something he couldn't see. Not in the literal sense, no shadows in the hallway, no footsteps in the night, but a presence, something off, something that didn't belong. He didn't have proof, but the feeling grew stronger every day that he wasn't the only one living in that house. So he decided to search. So he pulled open every built-in closet, brushing off the dust that gathered inside, checked every cabinet under the sink, every drawer, every inch of unused space. He even knocked along the walls, listening for hollow spots, just in case something was hidden, but nothing. By the time afternoon rolled around, he was exhausted, mentally more than physically, and that's when it hit him, the attic hatch. There was a small square panel in the kitchen ceiling. He remembered noticing it when he moved in, but never thought much of it. When he'd asked the building manager, the answer had been simple. "Oh, that's just for electrical maintenance. Nothing up there." Still, Chinu couldn't shake the sudden urge. He grabbed a ladder, set it under the hatch, turned on his phone flashlight, and carefully pushed the panel open. The hatch creaked upward with a faint resistance. A cool, dry draft slipped down from the dark space above. He slowly raised his head, the light cutting through the black, and he saw a narrow crawl space. It ran along the ceiling like a hidden corridor above the kitchen. There were wires and ventilation pipes winding through it, and below them, just enough room for a person to lie down. Chinu's stomach turned. There were things up there. Tiny scraps of foil, crumbled pieces of paper, random, out-of-place debris scattered like the remnants of someone who had been living there. At first, he tried to rationalize it. Maybe the previous tenant had dumped trash up there for some bizarre reason, but the idea didn't hold. Who would go through the trouble of climbing into the ceiling just to throw away garbage? So he stared into that narrow, filthy space for a long moment, and then, silently, slowly, he lowered his head, stepped off the ladder, and closed the hatch. Not a word, not a sound. He just shut it. Because some part of him already knew. Whatever had been hiding in that ceiling, it hadn't left. That night, Chinu locked his bedroom door tighter than usual, double-checked the latch, checked again. He lay in bed, blanket pulled up to his chest, trying to convince himself to sleep. But the silence was unbearable. It was too still. It was so quiet, it made his ears ring. Eventually, he'd drift off, uneasy, light sleep, but something pulled him awake. His throat was dry. He got up, shuffled toward the kitchen for a glass of water. And that's when he saw it. The ceiling hatch, the one he had closed with his own hands, was slightly open, just barely. But it hadn't been like that before. And after that night, Chino couldn't sleep at all. This wasn't just a feeling anymore, not paranoia, not imagination. There was someone or something in that house. He was sure of it now. The next morning, he went off and bought a small CCTV camera, one recommended by a friend. He mounted it in the corner of his bedroom, angled so it faced the kitchen and that cursed hatch. From then on, every morning, his first task was to review the footage. He became obsessed, but for several days, nothing happened. Just static darkness, silence. Then, one morning, he was scrolling through the overnight footage when his thumb froze on the screen. 2:47 a.m., pitch black, not a single light on the house. And then the ceiling hatch began to move from the inside. It opened slowly, first just a sliver. Then the lid tilted slightly, letting in a faint stream of moonlight from the hallway window. And that's when it appeared. A mass, dark, blurry, moving just enough to be seen. And then hair, oily, matted hair, short and clinging to something that looked like skin. It slid over the edge of the hatch, almost like it was dripping. Then an elbow, a shoulder, a back. Something or someone was crawling out of that ceiling. It was human. It had to be. The way it moved was what chilled Chino to the bone. It wasn't frantic. It wasn't rushed. It was slow and careful. Every motion, from the slow descent of an elbow to the way the figure shifted its weight, was quiet and practiced, as if this wasn't the first time, as if whoever this was had done it many times before, like someone who have trained themselves not to wake the person sleeping just a few feet below. Chino's hands trembled as he watched. No matter how much he wanted to pause the video to look away, he couldn't. There was no doubt anymore. Someone had been living there, in that house, in the darkness he never thought to check, just above his head. The footage went on. The figure never fully emerged, only the upper body came out. It leaned over the edge of the hatch, just far enough to look down into Chino's bedroom, right over his head, just watching, not moving, not making a sound, just staring at him sleep. And then, after what felt like an eternity, it began to move again. It crept down, soft, slow steps across the kitchen counter, then to the fridge, helped itself to food, and finally it sat on the sofa, like it belonged there, as if this was its home, and Chino was the intruder. After a while, it climbed quietly back, stepped onto the sink, reached for the hatch, and pulled itself back up. A barely audible sound as the panel sealed shut again. The video ended in silence. Chino couldn't breathe. His heart felt like it had stopped somewhere inside his chest. His eyes stayed locked on the frozen frame. The last glimpse of that thing, that person disappearing into the ceiling. The footage told him everything he needed to know. That thing, that person, had always been there from the very beginning. The only difference now was that Chino finally knew. And after witnessing that disturbing footage, Chino couldn't sleep, not even for a second. The person in the video, they were real, alive, moving, and worst of all, they had been sharing his life, breathing the same air, in the same space, at the same time. By morning, Chino had made up his mind. There was no hesitation. He called the police, and when the officers arrived and he showed them the footage, even they looked shaken. They were shocked. Wait, so you're saying someone was actually up there? Yes, that was at 2:47 a.m. last night. For all I know, he could still be in the house. The two officers followed him inside. They began to search the property, room by room. Jinwoo brought out the ladder again, hands cold, and his palms were sweaty now. He climbed up, just like before, and slowly opened the ceiling hatch. Nothing. No face, no movement, and no sound at all. But there were signs. Scraps of foil packaging, a torn bread bag shredded by hand, a small flashlight, a crumpled piece of cloth. Traces of someone who had lived there. Not just passed through, lived. And one of the officers exhaled sharply. Yeah, someone's been up here, no doubt. But it looks like they're gone now. He glanced around the ceiling structure. Judging by the setup, it's possible they found another way out. Maybe through the vents or external access points. There are ways. Jinwoo stared into the dark gap above his kitchen, the same one that had hovered silently above his life for months. He didn't feel safe, not because someone had lived there, but because now he had no idea where this person had gone. A few days passed, and the presence that had vanished from Jinwoo's home, leaving behind nothing but crumbs, wrappers, and dread, was now in the hands of the police. At first, they thought it might be a case of a transient intruder, just some homeless drifter who found an opportunity. But the truth was far worse. 1 week later, around 4 a.m., a police patrol just 2 blocks from Jinwoo's house heard something strange. A faint scraping noise in the narrow alleyway. No windows, no foot traffic. Someone was trying to force open a metal door, and when they investigated, they found him. The man from the footage, the one who had stared down from the ceiling. He didn't resist. He just stood there holding a single boiled egg in one hand. In his pocket, they found several worn notebooks, each filled with hand-drawn floor plans and home addresses. The investigation that followed shocked even the officers. Turns out, the neighborhood Jinwoo lived in had been developed a few years prior, a planned community of standalone homes built with nearly identical layouts. Same ceilings, same vents, same access points. So if you figure out one, you could figure out all of them. And that's exactly what he did. He hadn't just lived above Jinwoo. He had been inside at least 4 other homes, every single one occupied by people living alone. Residents who'd noticed the occasional missing snack, a strange draft, a sound in the night, but dismissed it as nothing, just their imagination. The man confessed to everything. One night, he helped himself to someone's cherry jam. Another night, he warmed up leftover soup in a stranger's microwave. Some nights, he slept curled up inside a coat closet, only to disappear again through the ceiling before dawn. Each day, a different house, a different life to borrow, but always close, always unseen until now. There was one thing the man said during his confession, a sentence that officers couldn't forget. I never took anyone's life. I just lived in it with them. The police booked him for trespassing and theft, but without violence or serious damage, they said the charges wouldn't hold much weight. He would be out soon enough. But Jinwoo couldn't stay another night in that house. Even though the man was gone, the fear wasn't. The sound of something shifting above the ceiling, the feeling of eyes on his back when he turned off the lights, it all lingered. So he packed his things and decided to leave for good. And that's when he found it. While moving the wardrobe in the living room, a small piece of paper slipped from the crack behind it. Jinwoo picked it up. It was a note, handwritten. A full sketch of his house. There were notes, detailed, obsessive records. Leaves for work 8:37 a.m. Sits on sofa 8:12 p.m. Sleeps 1:18 a.m. Light snorer. Every movement, every habit, every moment of his private life tracked. He realized then, with a sinking feeling in his chest, that this man hadn't just hidden in the house. He had memorized it. He studied him. He knew his rhythm better than Chinu himself did. The man may have been in custody now, but Chinu would never know for sure just how long he'd been watched, how many nights they had shared. And the worst part, there were other notebooks, other addresses, other names. So while Chinu moved on, fleeing the house he could no longer call home, someone else, somewhere, might still be sleeping soundly tonight, completely unaware that they're not really alone. Okay, that's the end of today's story. Creepy, right? By the way, have you ever had that weird feeling, weird thought that maybe someone was living with you without you knowing, hiding in your attic, your walls, your ceiling? Sounds crazy until it's not. Let me know in the comments if you've ever felt something was off in your home, like a door you didn't remember opening, or food missing when you swore you hadn't touched it. I'm curious and maybe a little scared to read your stories. Okay, see you guys in our next episode, and until then, bye-bye.